Good morning, and thank you for staying with us here on Smooth 98.1. You're listening to Smooth Breakfast with me, Valentine Ohu, and I'm joined by Tunde Okufi at Big Coofs. Good morning, Tunde.
Morning, Valentine.
Good morning, and welcome to Freshly Pressed 91. And of course, welcoming Wade at Ring, Nigeria. Good morning.
Good morning, Valentine. Good morning, Lagos.
Good morning. Glad to have you in this Monday, the 18th of November 2019. Join the conversation by sending us messages on WhatsApp 0809 444 0981. On YouTube, we're live, streaming live on YouTube so you can see the faces in the studio and listen and contribute to the conversation. Also, Twitter is Smooth981FM. The hashtag is Freshly Pressed 981. Please send us messages there. We start with this story from the Guardian newspaper today. The Independent National Electoral Commission, on the heels of the election that was conducted over the weekend in Bayelsa and Kogi states, it declares Kogi West senatorial election inconclusive. Please take us through the story, especially highlighting the margins between the two leading candidates for the election, Smart Adeyemi of the All Progressives Congress and People's Democratic Party's Dino Melai in Kogi, for instance.
Okay. All right, great. So this is the West Senatorial election for Kogi State.
Yes.
Between Dino Malai, very popular Dino Malai, and Smart Adeyemi. Right now, Smart Adeyemi polled over 80,000 votes, 80,118 votes, while Dino Melaye scored 59,548 votes. A number of, however, a number of polling units, elections in certain polling units were cancelled, in 53 polling units to be precise. That led to a total of 43,127 votes being cancelled, being null and voided. That represented a figure that was higher than the margin of difference between Smart Adeyemi and Dino Melaye. The difference between the votes, between the 80,000 and then the 59,000, almost 60, is 20,570. Right. So within the number of cancelled votes, there is the possibility is that there might have been people who intended to vote for Dino, which would have put him on parity or higher than his opponent. It may also be that more of those votes would have gone to his opponent. So where this is normal and standard practice, whether the number of cancelled votes are higher than the margin of error, or higher than the margin between the two candidates, then clearly you need to rerun the election. Okay. And it speaks to a bunch of other things. Even where in any election, I'm not, I'm not. If the number of council votes are beyond a certain percentage of error, ideally you should do the elections again. But in this case, it's so clear that the difference between the two, there are more invalidated votes than the difference between the two candidates have been successfully counted. So it needs to be rerun. For me, what it speaks to is the efficiency and the manner in which we run our elections. To be honest, this is it's a waste of funds. Bottom line, lots of effort has gone into this. There's been lots of media attention. INEC has, voted, and it has to be redone. For there to be so many, there are almost as many invalidated votes as Dino has valid votes. Almost.
Very interesting.
For me, it speaks to. It's almost deliberate. It's very odd. It's square for this for there to be so many council polls, and it would be nice for irregular. Exactly, it'd be nice to know what irregularities exactly led to this, and what they will do to prevent it going forward.
I mean, comparing this to the governorship polls or gubernatorial polls that happen in both states, almost concurrent simultaneously, right? We see that the gubernatorial results they're out. We know who the winners for those sections are. If the videos that went online or went viral online are anything to go by, we see cases of voter intimidation, votes buying, exactly, violence and everything.
Right, and you tie that into what Jonathan was saying, a couple of days ago, which is, can we make this electronic? But I say yes, it should help. But all the intimidation that happens prior to that time, if you still have to come to some location to use an electronic device, people will still be coerced. There'll still be a lot of violence that leads up to it.
Yeah. Thank you, Tunde. Next story from this day newspaper reads: Blackout looms as Gencos threaten shutdown over 600 billion naira fund. This is your turf, Wadi. The Gencos are talking about this again. This is same rhetoric, time in, time out. What is this common problem that exists? They're saying they're threatening to shut down power supply if the federal government refuses to disburse the 600 billion naira intervention fund. What is the problem?
Um, the major problem is actually the Gencos are not getting paid as at when due. From the reports, the Gencos say they need about 25 to 30% of their bills paid regularly for them to be able to even remain in the generation of power. But currently, what they receive is about just 15% monthly, which is a far cry of what they should be receiving. Even at that 30%, it means that they're just barely working to get power generation or supply into the grid. But it's interesting because a lot of on the story, Mbet is featuring very prominently, and I'm not sure this was the case when the 701 billion was disbursed, because I know what happened then was that the monies came and the CBN either paid directly to the Gencos or they paid directly to the gas suppliers. And if today Mbet is threatening that they are the ones holding the money, then it just goes to show that what exactly is the real process for disbursing these funds.
And Mbet is a Nigerian bulk
Nigerian
electricity
bulk
trading.
electricity trading company. Those are the ones who receive the monies and pay the Gencos. From the report also, 3 of the Gencos are technically shut down. So what it then means is that the quantum of energy coming into the grid has reduced. So if we're currently experiencing power shortages in some places, then you would know why. But the interesting part of it is the report by the African Development Bank and the ECOWAS Regional Regulatory Authority, which says that Nigeria and Niger and Guinea, have the least tariffs on electricity.
Yeah.
It's a lot of the power companies have complained about low tariffs and the need for them to adjust tariffs. But at the end of the day, we must also look at the fact that how do you increase tariffs in their economic times? It's a chicken and egg situation that the Gencos face. But at the end of the day, I guess what the CBN should do, or the federal government should do, is release these funds as quickly as possible. All the documentations that are required from the spokesman of the Gencos have been duly put in place. So CBN should just directly either pay their gas suppliers or send the money to the Gencos to pay their gas suppliers, and let's see how it goes.
As much as I agree that the parties involved in the business arrangement should really, meet up with their terms, or terms of operation or whatever terms that they agreed upon, I do not agree that or subscribe to the usual rhetoric that's still been repeated time in and time out, saying that Nigeria and Guinea are the lowest paying or lowest charging electricity, whatever the rates that we have are the cheapest in this region, because basing what's going on that argument doesn't really pan out, because if you actually look at these other countries that are exactly, because other countries that are charging more, they do not have the issues that we have.
Are providing the services.
How about sorting out the issues, making sure that there's regular power, the national grid is in top form, meet all these terms of agreement, and then let's talk about increasing rates, but provide the service first.
And I agree with you. So it requires investments. It requires their monies being paid as at when due, so that they can actually put in this infrastructural investment, and then you can now hold them culpable if they are not providing service as it's meant to be.
Because now it'll be easy for Mr. A or Mr. B to give excuses for why they're not providing the service that they signed up to. Vincent Meka from Adeba said, in case of Bielsa and Kogi elections, as long as the youth allow themselves to be used by the politicians, electoral violence in the country will continue to happen. We encourage you to send in your messages on WhatsApp 0809-444-0981. Let's go to this next story today. Federal government takes over $1 million e-government training center from KOICA. That's the company owned by the government of Korea, Republic of Korea. They handed this facility over on Friday. I really would love to understand the reason for this institute. They said it's training, the e-government training and everything to public servants. Seeing that this agreement was signed, or the deal was really signed in 2013, it's worth $8.56 million.
Yes.
Take us through the story,
Right.
please.
So it's worth a lot more than this $1 million facility that they've handed over to us. And the collaboration, or should I say the efforts, the partnership does not end with the project, as the Koreans have said. But I mean, what are the advantages of this? It's good in the midst of all the other gloomy things that we can complain about. This is something that is good because it helps in a certain way. This is leveraging technology, ICT, information communications technology, in the space of governance, and it helps in a number of ways. It brings efficiency for one, and so cost is one way that you can really look at it, because it helps. Instead of potentially having, when not necessary, maybe having feet on the ground, if you can disseminate information to people, it makes it a lot. It makes it, there's a cost element to that. It helps with reach, like I just mentioned as well. It's easier to get your message across, because it's technology based. It can be audited. Right? Auditing is going to check who sent what or who approved what, so to say, where within a particular chain or an activity, and that hopefully will bring some accountability, because then who authorized what, which officer put out what message, which officer did such and such.
So
especially when it comes to accessing government services.
Okay, so could it be seen as a data center of some sort?
That and more. Really.
Okay.
So it's
a training center.
But this is a training
center.
This is a training center to help train government officials. But now e-government has to do with a number of different layers. One, dissemination of information,
yes,
right, to the populace, right. So it's in a more efficient and coordinated manner. We complain daily today about not knowing what the position of the government is on certain matters, not being able to the confusion around policies and what the law is. Also, there's a freedom of information angle to this as well, so it will help with that. It also helps empower people. Would help empower the governed by making them a part of policy formation when done properly. Right, the people generally have a direct say. You have a direct say into policies that affect you directly. So, for instance, we're here debating and complaining. A bunch of people are complaining. Some are in support anyway of the National Assembly saying they want to focus on genotype testing.
Yes.
If we had, e-government, it probably would be. It would provide a means to measure better the pulse of people. What really do the people want us to focus on and deal with? And that varies from area to areas, from geography to geography.
Some people say, "Don't you have social media for this already?"
Social media. They're disparate systems managed by disparate entities. You have to be listening on social media as a government, as any and every government should. But what about creating your own platforms and channels? And this is not about really social media. This is also about access to government service.
Okay.
Right. So you need a passport. There's a government platform you can go to. You need a driver's license, not the different and disparate systems that we have today. And someone says, "Oh, the process and procedure for obtaining this is here." Speak to another officer. They say, "Oh no, it's there." It's a lot of confusion.
Yeah.
So this will help bring a lot of efficiency to that, and it's good. Let's just hope they use it. It's so it's electronic. And the story points out that a 250 kVA generator was also donated to the facility so that it can stay on. And
Well,
that
why-
line, in and of itself, right, highlights the fundamental issues that we need to deal with. You know, e-government is great, but some
Yeah.
of these foundations,
I can
if
have a
there's no
24-hour
power, how do we?
service every time.
Where's the E?
Especially when the government is commissioning in a generating set, an alternative source of power.
Yes.
Oh wow, that's such progress. Emeka from Amua, thank you, Tunde. Emeka from Amua says, with the degree of banditry and ballot box snatching that desperate politicians now becoming a permanent feature in our elections, it seems anyone preparing for elections in Nigeria must also budget for small army as well. Sad situation we're in. Max Zorin says, good morning, guys. Increase in tariff at the disco level, not at the Genco level. Okay. For those who say provide the service first, the agreement when buying these companies was for tariffs to increase over time and under specific circumstances. Time has passed. Circumstances have come. No increase. So the federal government is in severe breach of contract. But how do you fight the government? So let's be empathic, as the private sector is not meant to fund social amenities. Thank you, Max Zorin, for your clarity and your view. And of course, we have this one from Kachi. Kachi says, Val, this is just the regular lazy management problem that we have in Nigeria. So the shortcut is charge the users more, provide prepaid meters to every home, and people will be forced to pay. Then they cut and take a percentage from payments made by people owing. That will so help them generate money, such funds. Kachi, thank you for your opinion on the power issue. It's something we'll continue to have a conversation on. This time around, let's switch lanes to go back to the elections and talk about the challenges in terms of security. The Police Service Commission has said that armed men overwhelmed security agents during Saturday's governorship elections in Bayelsa and Kogi states. Going back to the issue we highlighted, the security challenges, even before the election started. Remember how we touched on stories where the army was pulled back? And they said it's a civil, security practice or schedule. But Tunde, they are complaining right now and saying and placing the blame squarely on political bigwigs. They said they are the ones that are arming these thugs.
Oh, clearly, I mean, that's in my opinion as well. That's where the blame lies. We're in a situation where government no longer has, and has for a long time lost this a monopoly on violence. And any government to function properly needs that so that it can enforce its laws.
Yeah.
And also allow the rest of the populace go about their daily activities.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's something that's as important as the government, or at least an arm or an agency of the government, can't even conduct proper elections. Here we have a clear case of our security agents being overwhelmed by armed men. Who are these armed men? Who is arming them?
Yeah.
It's a crisis when the government doesn't have a monopoly on power, because what you're telling us is that you're not really in control. And that creates a problem. It's a huge problem, something of immense concern. The story talks about, proliferation of arms. Or who are the people responsible for proliferating these arms? Who gives out, or who started the process of giving out arms at elections? Arms that you can't recall and are called back, right? So, it's a Nigerian story. Right? So there's nothing new about this. It takes, for us to resolve it, it takes political will, and in many instances, it's just one of those things that are lacking, because again, it forms part of the infrastructure that supports a number of our political class and helps them get into power.
I mean, so if you're going to analyze a possible win, for ensuring that elections maybe sometime in the future, in the near, millions of years to come, possibly, that will be able to get rid of violence entirely from Nigerian elections. What would you think the best solution should come from?
If climate change doesn't kill the planet first, millions of years. I don't know which. I think it might just outlive us.
Which would be quicker.
because we talk about how to make political positions less attractive. Some countries, to some extent, have achieved that. Yes.
Service. People need to come into office once. I'll never forget. There's a picture that stays in my mind. I think it was I was looking at a picture of the Prime Minister of one of the Caribbean nations, and I like looking at detail. I looked at his belt he was wearing. I noticed that the belt was flayed. It was old. Even I don't have a flayed belt.
Yeah.
And we know all our politicians it gives an essence and indication into the man and the individual. There's no money here. I didn't come to do this job because there was money. It's entirely different here. We find people who were in poverty before, impoverished, and the bank accounts were lazy. In fact, maybe people who were selling recharge cards before they got into government, becoming multimillionaires. That's a problem. There's too much profit in government and there's no check and balance. So it's hard, eh? People, where there is huge profit, human beings will kill to get to.
Yeah. So somebody can have 5,000 naira in his bank account today, and tomorrow he becomes a political office holder. He gets 50 billion naira.
And nobody questions that. In fact,
Nobody
we
questions
celebrate it. And we celebrate him and his cars that he flaunts in front of us.
And designer
on
belts
social
and
media.
things.
Exactly.
Thank you, Tunde. It's a continuous problem we need to tackle together. Olu from Alaka says, actually, Bukun from Ijara, on the Genco issue, we must ask which business can survive on 30% of its revenue. The Gencos are manufacturers of the power, and they have been bleeding for years. MBET was set up due to the act to guarantee payment for prospective investors in Gencos. Can a radio station survive on payment just for its license alone? No. Afi says, while INEC was preparing for a hitch-free election, politicians are always busy preparing for war. Electoral violence is not easy to curb because the actors are also perpetrators. Adiola says, good morning, great analyst. The issue of armed men causing disruption is easy. Whoever they support should be disqualified. Interesting. Next story. Wadi, we come to talk about federal government releasing circulars on minimum wage. Labor unions have been waiting for this. The circular is on minimum wage consequential adjustments. Please take us through the story.
Finally, we're gradually coming to the end of this minimum wage.
Are we?
Well, I guess we are. At least some circulars have started going out. The federal government have actually released the circular on the consequential adjustments. Some states have started receiving them, and they would go further to negotiate with the states on the implementation and all. And
But how's this going to make a difference? Since the governors are still complaining they don't have money. Same thing they've been
but
saying
at
from
least-
the start.
at least the central body has agreed to something, and they've agreed to some form of percentages of increment.
So when you say central body, who are you referring to?
I'm talking about the federal government and the National Labor Union.
Okay.
So now the states, the responsibility, I think, for me, or what I think they should start doing is saying, okay, fine, the minimum wage is 30,000. If it's, for instance, that's almost about 70 or 80% increase from 18,000. So what are we going to do? Those who say they can't pay, how much can you pay, or what are the percentages that you can start putting in place for your state? So don't just go there and say, oh, it's war because the federal government has signed minimum wage is 30,000, means that if you're not paying 30,000, then we're not listening to you. So I think with the circular going out now, what the state bodies should start looking at is working with the states and seeing how best to ensure that there's an agreed increment on the wages of the salaries, and not just go out for total war and say if it's not this amount, then we're not going through it, because we know that some states who couldn't even pay the 18,000, they've not paid for months, some years, and you are coming back now and telling them that there's a 23% increase for grade level 7 to 14 and so on and so forth. But the good thing, like I said, is that there's been an agreement. The circulars have gone out. Some states have received them. Some will receive them before the end of the week. And the next step now is to go back to the states and start negotiating on getting something for the workers. And that's where I would leave it. But at least, like I said, the good thing is the federal government has finally signed that agreement, and the labor unions are happy about that.
All right. So by your judgment, would it be safe to say that now the power to negotiate what applies to them uniquely will be different from states to states?
I think it should be. I think it should be.
Okay.
I think it should be.
Thank you. Today, the next story is from the Guardian newspaper. This one reports of the army's efforts and success in rescuing octogenarian and 6 other Boko Haram captives in Borno. I saw pictures on Friday into Saturday. That really made me happy. It said the troops of the 26th Task Force Brigade Operation Lafia Dole, they rescued 7 people at Dalu village during a clearance operation in Mandara Mountains of Goza Council, Borno State. Your thoughts?
So, I mean, this is a feel-good story
Yes.
for all of us, not just the military, to be honest, because it provides a counterbalancing narrative of, abducted persons,
Mm.
right? Which still is ongoing today. Let's not forget that. But at least this is a story of rescue of all people, not just because they were elderly, but I mean the Nigerian citizens. So it's really good. It goes into the detail of the number of people they rescued, 3 women, including an 80-year-old woman, 4 children that were held captive by Boko Haram. They were living with the terrorists at Dalu village, Hill settlement, which is 26 kilometers east of Goza town. And then they even, throw in the bit that they immunize the kids against polio. The army
Imagine
medical
that.
team. So it's feel good,
It's amazing.
all round. Yeah. So it really is. It really is good. We hope.
We'll have more
Hope
of
is not a
this.
strategy. Yeah. So, but
Yeah.
I was going to mention another one. I was going to say we pray that this there is a prayer, maybe a strategy actually.
Yeah.
So that this is a sustained turnaround. To be honest, there are just too few of this of the positives coming out of the war, of like the efforts against Boko Haram. Another important thing that the story mentions is that the director general of the internal displacement monitoring center says what this has cost us, the internal displaced persons within the northeast has cost us $2.3 billion,
Yes.
right? Which is staggering 831 billion naira, and this is costs that have been incurred by different government agencies in dealing and managing and handling these people. And let's spare a minute, it's for the thought that the fact that we know the conditions that a lot of people in these camps stay in. So we know the vast majority of these funds are not touching them.
Yeah.
So
That's really good. Thank you. Thank you, Tunde, for your analysis. And shout out to the troops of the 26th Task Force Brigade, Operation Lafia Dole. Thank you very much, V, from Lekki. I like that you're listening. Emmanuel sent in this message, reacting to the election issue. He said, "What do you expect? I lost interest in elections in Nigeria in 2003 when, as a law undergraduate at UNEC, I served as a returning officer in Enugu. If I tell you what the then incumbent governor and his boys did that day, you will shudder. Pump action guns were shed like pure water." Okwemi Praise says, "So long as the people are poor and uneducated, there will be tools in the hands of the political class. Solution is educate the people and empower them economically." IK from Lasu says, "The fact remains that as long as Nigerian political landscape, it remains very lucrative, and this distorted view of siren blaring politicians abound, it remains only but a vicious cycle." Yimika says, "Since violence came from APC and PDP camps, why can't their candidates be disqualified?" Shego says, I can order my thugs to cause mayhem in my opponent's party colors party's colors to get them disqualified. Could it work?" That's what Shego thinks. And Dari from Lagos says, "When the politicians say they did not want armed policemen near the polling booths, it was to allow the thugs to overwhelm them to the rig. What can baton-wielding policemen do with AK-47 wielding thugs?" Good question there. Now, National Assembly is set to curb excessive taxation. How? From Daily Times. What are your thoughts on this?
This is interesting, but one thing I would say about this, and quickly, is let's all go back and look at the proposed finance bill, because they're saying that there are quite a number of acts that they want to look at and amend, like the petroleum profit tax, the custom and excise tariff act, company income tax, personal income tax, and it's not just the focus and people shouldn't just focus on the 2.5% increase on VAT,
because that was the major highlight, because that's where the conversation gets.
And I was fortunate to listen. I think it was your show last week, Wednesday.
Yes.
And when the two guys who were here about the tax actually started to explain this, and I from my own perspective as having a finance background, I said, okay, this is good. I will probably have to go and look for that act and read it.
Yes. The finance bill, you mean?
The finance bill.
Okay.
Sorry, the finance bill, and read it. Why? Because there's quite a number of incentives that will probably come for small and medium scale enterprises if it does pass through, and it would be good for the country, because it would help to start to grow those businesses to at least grow the bottom layer of the economic diaspora in ensuring that more people are able to access employment in small businesses, and so much monies are not paid in taxes as it is today.
So essentially making them breathe.
Exactly.
So as they are
So
growing,
as they are growing,
they're growing
you're
responsibility
growing
as well.
responsibility.
Thank you very much, Wade. Thank you, Tunde Okufi. Tunde Okufi is at Big Hopes on Twitter. If you go on Twitter, check out Wade at Ring Nigeria. Please, let's continue this conversation with hashtag FreshlyPress981. Thank you for tuning in on YouTube. Please subscribe to our channel. Next, we talk sports inside of the locker room. My name is Valentine.
All right.